I'm Mark Purton, Executive Editor with the Trust at the Wall Street Journal and Barron's Group. I'd like to welcome you all to our session. I'd like to start by talking about a recent survey conducted by WJ Intelligence CIOs and CTOs, sponsored by NETSCOUT. We found that collaboration between IT and security teams is a top strategic priority for businesses that want to address their cybersecurity challenges. Yet getting there can be a challenge in itself. And to discuss some of the challenges to collaboration and some of the solutions, I'm joined today by two people with firsthand expertise in this subject. NETSCOUT's Senior Vice President and Chief Information Officer, Thor Wallace, and NETSCOUT's Vice President and Chief Information Security Officer, Debbie Briggs. Welcome, Thor and Debbie.
Thanks, Mark.
Thanks, Mark.
So I'd like to start asking a little bit about, as the CISO becomes an increasingly crucial role for enterprises of all types, many organizations are working out exactly where in their organizational structure the role best fits. As CIO and CISO, where do your areas of responsibility overlap, and where do they diverge? And how has that interaction between your roles evolved in recent years?
So thanks for the question. I mean, it's a very big topic. We'll try to cover as much as we can today. But let me just kind of start by saying that the security function and Debbie reports to me. And, that may be typical, that may be sort of atypical. What I want to do is maybe explain a little bit as to why we've come to that sort of organizational arrangement. And I also want to talk a little bit about sort of the tricks and trade and sort of some sort of more details about how it works, where the areas are that works well, and some areas that I think, we have to be, somewhat careful around and thoughtful around. So if you think about security and IT, I mean, in some sense, they're fundamentally different objectives, so IT is very focused on the business and providing business with enablement and digital transformation and operating the company. Security obviously deals with risks in a very different way. And so when people think about security and kind of where it fits, my experience tells me that there's kind of two ways to organize it. One is where security is separate from the IT organization, or an integrated model. Obviously, we've chosen the integrated model. If I look at some of the other companies I've worked for, when security sort of stands outside of IT, often the role is really policy setting. And policy setting, looks very specific around, right down to the firewall rules, or very specific sort of policies and procedures that IT organizations really follow. But they're really setting policy and giving that to the IT organization to implement. We sort of, in contrast to that, we have what I'll call an integrated model. And our integration actually stems at very different levels and very, kind of very deeply rooted. One is sort of the architectural synergies. What does that mean? That means that, when we think about rolling out new technology or going in a very clear direction, we want to bake in security right from the ground up. And so that's kind of the idea of architectural integration. There's operational synergies. And so, when security is sort of doing security ops and IT is doing ops, in our view, there's a lot of synergies that can happen at that operational level. We'll talk more about that. Organizational synergies. And so what I mean by that is, when I think about security as being a big part of any organization now, it needs to be sort of embedded throughout all of IT. So when I think about the help desk, and I think about the networking team and the applications team, I want those folks to be as aware, or not an expert, but very aware of security and making sure that they're very thoughtful about that. So I really want to have that sort of organizational synergies. And finally, in terms of execution, project prioritization, direction, roadmaps, all of those things, security will dominate and minimally be part of, but in some cases dominate the sort of projects we do as an organization. So again, I would want to have Debbie and team at the table to say, hey, directionally, this is where we should go from that standpoint, and these are the projects that really matter to us from a security. So that's where we see the sort of synergies. I think you have to also be, as I said before, you have to have that independence, because security reaches across the entire organization. It's not. It is an enterprise function. It isn't just confined to IT. So we need IT, and Debbie certainly is. She'll talk more about this, but I think it's important that the security team, and particularly the CISOs, being very independent of the CIO and the IT organization. We'll talk more about how that independence what that independence looks like. But I think the secret sauce to all this is the personalities and the working relationships, both between Debbie and me, and really throughout the IT organization. So, here, the security team is part of the IT leadership organization, and we basically strive to make sure that whatever we do operationally, architecturally, and project priorities get really funneled and sort of prioritized with security in mind. The thing that I would want to build on a little bit on the independence, and I'll turn it over to Deb in a few seconds, is if you think about security, it has to have that sort of governance process, and it's vital that the CISO drives that governance. And what we have done here internally is we have executive level, sort of a cybersecurity executive committee that really talks about the trade-offs between organizational risk and the impact of potentially slowing the company down for security reasons. And there's a natural tension between security and sort of operational effectiveness. So Deb is driving those discussions at the enterprise level, and making sure that the CISO is a very prominently featured to the audit committee, to the executive team, so that you have, even if the reporting relationship is within the CISO, within the CIO or the IT organization, you have to maintain that independence. And so Deb, I know I've said a lot, so maybe you can pick on a few of those points.
Yeah, so on the ride in this morning, Mark, I figured you'd ask a question like this to kick us off. And I really think that it's not so much a reporting decision, it's a relationship decision and a relationship discussion. It's that relationship. And as Thor said, I need to, or anybody, a CISO, a security group, needs to have some independence. And Thor alluded to that natural tension between IT and security. That's always going to be there. If you think about the CIA triad, from an IT perspective, that an IT organization is most concerned. They're concerned with all three, but availability is sort of their bread and butter, and ensuring everything is up and always available. From a security perspective, availability isn't the first point that I would go to. I naturally would lean to integrity and confidentiality. So there, and it's just it's not that Thor and I, arm wrestle each other. It's just we each have our own agenda. Our own agenda has to be able to play well together. But Thor brought up a really great point, is my independence. Think of it as if I found something within the IT organization that could have led us to a breach or something, an event happened. It's hard to tell your boss that, your boss and the other part of the team may have screwed up. But if there's that independence in that I report to an executive cybersecurity council where, Thor is a member, I am a member, but there are 5 or 6 other members of the company there, we can talk about, is this a risk we're willing to accept? Or is this a risk that we want to mitigate in this coming year? And I think that independent has helped. Well, Thor and I would naturally agree anyway, because we would talk it out until we agreed which way it was. But that's important, that no matter where that CISO reports, if it's directly to the CIO or wherever it reports, that you have to have that relationship, or you're always going to be fighting and never getting anything done. I think one of the things that helped Thor and I, and I'll let you talk about this, Thor, also, is we have what we call a single source of truth. So when we're looking and we're managing and monitoring the network and our applications, we're using packet data, which gives us the same vocabulary, the same terminology. We can start from the same viewpoint is when we approach a problem. And Thor, I know that that's helped us out a lot. I think from an operations perspective, having the same tool that we use on-prem and as we migrated to the cloud is a big help, but also having a common vocabulary and tool between the network team and the security team, the NETSCOUT team is very beneficial. I mean, Thor, would you agree?
Yeah, totally. I mean, it's been, it really helps. You mentioned the sort of idea of a common language, a single source of truth. I mean, it is vital that whether you're looking at your data, your operation, or your tools from an operational viewpoint, back to your point, Deb, IT tends to focus and hopefully obsess around performance, stability, all the things that make a company run. So we have to be obsessed about that. At the same time, if we're all looking at the same tools, it helps having that conversation. If it's a security issue, it has a certain signature. If it's not, we can sort of focus on just the operational impact. So, but that common sort of view and that perspective is vital to both, meeting the IT goals as well as the security goals.
And Mark, I think that is one of the big evolutions in the whole CISO role is, when CISOs first came out, at least in my mind, is I owned risk. I own the cybersecurity risk for the company. And as it's evolved, I don't own it. I am the person that educates others on the risk. And the risk is actually owned by the company, which Thor is a part of, which I am a part of. We each have our own opinion, but that is, a major step forward that we have seen in the last, 3 or 4 years that the companies are actually getting that the CISO doesn't own cybersecurity risk. I mean, Thor, completely.
No, I mean, you don't own a risk. Collectively, we have to build our environment so that we see it, we can mitigate it, we can deal with, if for example, if there's an incident, that we know how to forensically analyze it. All of those things are part of that. But to your point, Deb, security, as we all, I am not saying anything new here, but security is not an IT risk. It has a, part of it is for sure, but it's an enterprise risk. And we certainly collectively, you and I have spent a lot of time, I think, and really gotten a lot of traction on that throughout our enterprise at least.
And to that point, it's also a board level risk. And I think the visibility of a CISO is at the board level. And the board is asking some very difficult and challenging questions to CISOs. My reporting into Thor has given me that opportunity. Thor's a little bit more mature than I am. But CISOs were invited to the board, 5 years ago. They are now. So that executive presence and that ability to speak at that level, and the executive level, and not be speaking about bits and bytes, the board doesn't want to hear that. I think, working for Thor has given me the ability to develop that governance model that we have, but also given me that visibility and to the company and to the board. And where that is vital is in the event that we have an episode or an event at NETSCOUT, people trust and have had that ability to build that trust with me or your CISO. And I think that is critical.
Great. Thank you. That's a lot of great information about sort of how these roles have evolved over time, and the rationale for the reporting structure and visibility. That all makes a lot of sense. So thank you. Wanted to drill down a little in terms of some of the areas where your teams work together, and how you collaborate, how you work together. And one of the things I wanted to start with was sort of shared tools and data, and you touched on that a little, but interested in sort of why that could be potentially perceived in many ways as a foundational, really part of this relationship and how you're able to work together and collaborate.
Yeah, so I can kind of respond to some of that. I think that the tools and the data, we talked about this a little bit before. If I step back, two things. One is, it isn't the cost of a tool actually isn't really the licensing. The tool is, the real cost and the real, frankly, the benefit of a tool is when you achieve the sort of knowledge and expertise around the tool, so that you as a user, as an IT analyst or a security analyst, you understand by looking at whatever the dashboard, or you're looking at alerts, or you're looking at data coming from the environment, you have a clear sense of what's normal, what's not normal, what you should do, what's happening in real time, or forensically being able to go back and look at what has happened. But having that sort of understanding, and that, as Deb said, that vocabulary, that everyone in IT kind of is seeing the same picture, understanding what's going on, why things are happening or not happening. And that really is some of the synergies that we have achieved internally. And we've used the tool. We look at it from a couple perspectives minimally. One is we like to see the tool kind of from a sense of, is everything okay? Is everything working? Is it what's normal look like? Well, this looks normal, so that's always a good thing. Just knowing that there's no problem is a big step forward. The other thing is, of course, if there is something that starts to look anomalous and looks strange and sort of what's going on, you sort of have the built-in knowledge that says, geez, there is something now that we have to watch. And I think having that common definition, common tool, really supports the idea, whether it's security or from an IT operations standpoint, that those are the metrics and sort of the visibility that we really need. So maybe, Deb, we've talked a little bit about the synergies, but maybe we had an example around an issue that we had, and so the ability to sort of do that forensic. I think that would be quite an interesting a little bit more of a deep dive on that.
So, ransomware is in the news. A new ransomware attack happens. I think I read this morning, 11 seconds, and it cost $20 billion in 2021. And those numbers are staggering. And enterprises are doing, everything they think is possible to stop ransomware, but it's continuing to happen. And if you were paying me if I was making $20 billion a year, I wouldn't stop what I was doing either. So I want to use the example of ransomware for a minute. So in ransomware, there are these remote access brokers. So they go out and they find companies that they can get remote access into. They break into it, but that's their specialty. So they're the front door guy. So they can get the front door open. They go in, take a picture of the lobby or whatever they've gained access to, and then they leave. And they go out on the dark web, or they call their, ransomware friends and say, look, I have a company, either pay me for the information or give me a percentage of the ransom. And what we're finding is, if an enterprise sees that person gaining remote access, they can take, with packet data, you can take that system that the bad actor gained access to. You can figure out how they gained access to it. You can figure out the time they gained access to it, what IP address they came from. But most importantly, is you can take a look at that central system, and then you can pivot out and go, where on this central system did they move to? So did they move laterally, or did they stay to this one system? And where that becomes key is forensically, and from an investigative perspective, having to look at my whole enterprise. That's when it takes weeks and months to resolve some of these investigations. But if I can immediately put a ring fence around that server and say the person got to the server at this time and there were no outbound conversations from that server, then I can ring fence that server. I could even go, well, just on the off chance, let me just go out one ring and maybe add 10 or 20 systems to make everybody feel comfortable that you didn't just look and say, oh, they just got here and they left. So you can actually go out a ring and prove they didn't get to that outer ring. And you can do that with packet data. And that's, where that tool where the tool and packets become so powerful, is you can ring fence your investigation, cutting down a lot of time. And you can, and if you didn't catch it at that point and they were able to move beyond that initial entry point, again, you can use packet data to do detective work. So you're not quite at ransom. You're at, preventing, detecting. You're at detecting to figure out what systems they may have gotten to pull those offline and figure out how to recover from there. The big thing with ransomware now, they're figuring out, well, everybody's got smart and they now all have backups, and they have immutable backups that we can't get to. Well, they're now smart, and they're like, well, before we ransom and encrypt it, let's take it. And that way, when they're like, well, we're not going to pay you ransom, we're going to restore from a backup. You can say, yeah, but if you don't pay the ransom, I have the data and I'm going to, publish it out on the dark web. So again, being able to know that you don't have, a trail of traffic that has left your company is also key. So, did they really get the data, or are they just trying to spook you so that you pay the ransom? I think those are valid questions and things people should be concerned with.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know ransomware is definitely one of the big challenges that everyone is dealing with. And it's a great example of how you're using some of these technologies, and certainly some technology that NETSCOUT is very much at the forefront of working with to address that. Wondering if you could talk about a couple of other key challenges, and sort of not just the technology, but sort of just the way both of you are able to address some of these challenges in your respective roles and with your teams. One of the ones that comes up a lot is cloud security. Obviously, there's this continued migration, and organizations are, something like 98% of major enterprises are putting at least some of their workloads in cloud, but significant number are still wary of having some mission critical workloads in cloud. What are your thoughts on the sort of way to address some of the nagging questions about cloud security, and how the IT and security teams are able to work together to really address those?
Yeah, so we have done in NETSCOUT, we have done a lot of cloud work. So we only have basically one major application left on-prem. So this has been a bit of a journey for us. We've been doing this now for a good solid, looking back, 3 years now. And so what we did from the beginning, and this is something I referred to before, which is the sort of architectural synergy. So before we went off and got into really anything significant with cloud, we took the approach to having kind of what we call a reference architecture of how we actually want to set up the public cloud environment that we're going to use. And so at the table was not only security, but of course the networking team, the application team, the whole team, infrastructure team. But to the point of this conversation around security, Deb's team, Deb's architect particularly, was very, very involved right from the beginning around how we would want to set up AWS or Azure or any of the environments that we use. So I think that is really where it started. The issue that I think we all are concerned about is, as you move to the cloud, you're basically increasing your surface attack vector. And so you have to be really careful. And it's the type of thing where I wouldn't have felt comfortable, honestly, if we hadn't really spent probably more time than if I had predicted. I thought we would spend some time in sort of reference architecture, but we spent a lot more than I originally thought we would, for that one reason. Really, we wanted to be super safe. So that's how we kind of started. We definitely are very aware of the sort of other sort of aspects of security, but the same idea around the common tools and the common sort of platform still applies here. So what we wanted to do is just extend their tool footprint from the on-prem. We went obviously public cloud. We also have a private cloud, big presence in some of the colos. So that whole model extends. Now again, the security side of that is you got more service vectors. So we're very careful about that. The other point I'll make is around the sort of shadow IT. And so we have big parts of the company, and I think this is true for most companies, is you have other business organizations doing what makes sense for them, but the area of concern that we all have is around keeping that place and secure from every angle, whether it's a corporate sort of environment or an R&D organization or wherever. People are always trying to do the right thing, but you have to do this in a secure way. So one of the things we've done that is built around this reference architecture is we've worked with the business functions and really brought them into this, or what we're calling our center of excellence, or just our reference architecture, which has all of the security built in, all the sort of operational things, the tooling, all of the things that go with doing this, I think, in a professional sort of manner. So that has served us well. I mean, there are some things that we're continuing to do. Vulnerability scanning, that's a big part of it. So Deb, anything else on the cloud security you'd want to highlight?
So we took the tools we used on-prem, and we partnered with people who we could use the same tool in the cloud, because we don't need any more tools. We all know, I think we have a lot of tools that end up being shelfware. So I think that was important. But Thor's point is, from a purely security perspective, I am risk averse. That's my job. Making the attack surface bigger does not make me feel comfortable. But I understand the benefits to the company being able to spin up a machine in 10 minutes, a data center up in a couple of hours is huge. So being involved, and my team being involved in building the architecture gave me that comfort. I think some of the things that have continued to give me comfort is if someone wants to add a server, they've got servers that they can pick from that we've already hardened and added those security controls. So our automation tools are already adding all those security controls and policies that I would want involved. And I think the other thing that Thor mentioned was shadow IT. Prior to having a scaffolding, a cloud center of excellence, whatever you want to call it, we had pockets, as everybody does, of this group going out and getting an AWS or something in Azure. But there's that movie out there whose name I can't think of, but if you build it, they will come. Thor and the IT team built this cloud center of excellence, and people are coming. They're like, oh, I don't want to be off on my own. I do want to be part of we want to be part of your cloud environment, and people are coming. So that is reducing the risk to the company, because we are getting rid of that shadow IT. And people went there because they needed that, agile, fast pace to be able to spin things up and tear them down. Well, IT can now offer that to them in a secure manner, and people are just, coming to us as quickly as they can.
Great, thank you. And shadow IT is definitely one of those topics that could easily be a whole day's worth in itself. And definitely empathize with anyone in your roles that have to constantly sort of balance the needs of the organization against teams that are just going to go their own way. But as an organization, it does sound like you've done a lot to sort of address some of these things, and that leads to sort of one of the questions I had, which is the shift you're describing in your organization, and this cloud center of excellence is a good example of that. I think it's an example of sort of the whole IT and information security teams shifting from being a behind the scenes role and responsibility for something that really is integrated into the business as a strategic partner, and helping to determine what the business is becoming in the future, helping to drive digital transformation, helping to drive the future of the business. And I'm wondering if you could talk about sort of that change, becoming sort of more of a strategic partner with the rest of the business in developing the future of the enterprise, and how that's changed the roles of CISO, the roles of CIO, and sort of, what value you see from that and where you see that going in terms of the future of the organization.
Well, let me start. I can answer some of that. So I think the CIO role, clearly very forward, leaning in, business focused, and that I think has served us well as leader CIO. CIOs are now, definitely strategic focused. I think largely speaking, very strategically focused. And I think that sort of wrap this security conversation in, I think one of the things that is powerful about having the security function and the CIO or the IT function roll together is, at some point, you have to internalize the tension between making the biggest impact to the business and going big on digital transformation, moving as quickly as you can. At the same time, you have to do this in a secure way. So, there is a natural tension balancing process that you have to go through. And I think, whether it's the CIO or whether it's, if, for example, the CIO and the CISO report to, say, a COO or someone in the organization has to basically try to balance those two. So I think one of those are the kind of the big learnings that I've had around trying to reconcile, if you will, or balance the need for having a high impact on the business, but while doing it in a secure way. So that the dual perspective, I think, is really the tricky part. And I mean, that's why I think the job is fun and the job is strategic, is because those are, there's always pulling at each other, and you just have to kind of make your best decisions. For us, what really has really helped us is really what I would consider just good governance, good cybersecurity governance that says, hey, as a company, we're willing to go this far, we're not willing to go that far. So that is a good sort of break from the aggressive CIO agenda, which is to go and to move as quickly as we can to help with customer experience or whatever. So having that sort of that governance process has been really helpful for us. I think, frankly, you make less trade-off decisions if you've got good architecture. And I'm actually one of the things I'm quite proud of that we've done is, I think our IT architecture, just writ large in terms of just how we actually deliver services, is very innovative in terms of our architecture. I think that's helped us. It helps us right now with ransomware. We're working on that, and good architecture really has helped us. So I think those are some of the key things of the operational stuff that we've talked about already. But Deb, anything you want to go on? You want to disagree with me? Do you want to...
No, I don't want to disagree with you. But from a CISO perspective, security can't be the Department of No. And I think we've learned and is it's yes, and here is how. And I think that's the conversation that you have when someone approaches you. If the business is always coming to you and you're saying, nope, 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 they're going to stop coming to you. So you have to, build those relationships up so you can say, yes, and here is how. I think where the conversation really needs to start is what is that risk profile of the company? That is not something that I set or Thor sets. That is something that the company sets. So annually, we have a risk threat workshop where we sit down and we collectively decide, like Thor said, what's our risk profile? What kind of risks will we accept? What we won't accept? And it's interesting because a couple of years ago, I had, someone's like, oh, we should turn USBs off on laptops so people can't use them. And I'm like, I can talk both ends of it. But so I went to the Cybersecurity Executive Council, like, yeah, no, we accept that risk. And I'm like, okay. I explained to them what someone could do with it. But, if you're afraid of people taking files, USB is not the easiest way to do it. They're going to copy it up to a shared drive. But what was interesting is in January when we met again and we were going through the risks we had accepted because we review them on an annual basis, the committee was like, I'm not sure we want to accept that risk anymore. We're hearing a lot about people putting, we all talk about USB drives in the parking lot. But we're hearing more and more about that. Maybe this isn't a risk we want to accept anymore. And it's interesting that I didn't bring that conversation up. I just brought up, here are the risks as a company we've agreed to, and they're moving where the risk profile is automatically without me having to go in and champion that. And I think that speaks to, building up that relationship, building up here, yes, and here is how we do it, and being a business enabler, not always saying no. Thor, anything to add?
That's exactly right. It's it's just it's an art form, not a science. I mean, I think you have to have the relationship and you create the relationship over time. You don't just create it in the moment. And that sort of conversation is something that my recommendation, it would be to, start, if you haven't already, obviously a lot of people have, but, start that as soon as you can, because, getting the risk issue out from IT, which, in the historically, it's always sort of resided in IT, which I don't understand, but you gotta have to move that away and make it a much broader topic. And so, I think we've done that reasonably well.
No, that sounds great, and it actually sounds like NETSCOUT has done a lot of thinking and a lot of work in terms of this type of transformation and sort of just the governance issues you need to address, the risk issues you need to address. We only have a couple of minutes left. I'm wondering if you just have any sort of thoughts if businesses want to sort of start on this journey of having, the IT and the security teams better integrated into the business, have them, more involved in governance. What's a good starting point for businesses that are, just sort of thinking through this journey and maybe have had, a more traditional structure where, IT and security are, sequestered and, as you said, Debbie, they think that security owns risk, even though you probably shouldn't be the sole ownership. What's a good first step for companies that need to start this journey?
I think it's the governance. You have to come up with a governance model. You have to, as a CISO, I can communicate out risk and tell you what the risks are. And if someone asks me my opinion and what my recommendation is, I'm happy to share that. But I'm not the only voice in the room. And people have to understand that. And having Thor is a partner, having a strong, I know this is a CIO event, having a strong CIO relationship where he can be supportive or she can be supportive of that is key, especially looping in other executives. I think that is where you start. I think the second thing is you've got to, if the security team is always saying no, you've got to stop that. You've got to figure out how to say yes, and here is how. Even if it takes you longer to do it, but the business is coming to you for a reason and asking you for a reason. And if you always say no, or if no one is asking, they're working around you. I guess that's the key point. If no one's asking, everybody's working around you.
Great, thanks. And Thor, do you have any last thoughts on that topic?
No, I think I'm actually good. I appreciate the good chat. I mean, I really enjoyed sort of back and forth. So yeah, no, I think Deb said it well.
Okay, great. Well, I want to thank both of you for joining us this afternoon, and thank you to all the attendees for joining this session. Really appreciate your interest, and you'll see on the notes in the chat on the right, there's more information available in the lobby. So please, check the information out that NETSCOUT has provided. The next session in the main auditorium starts at 1:10. So we have a brief break now for everyone before they join the next session. And again, thank you all, and especially thank you so much, Thor and Debbie, for joining us today.
Thank you, Mark.
Thanks, Mark.
Bye.